Hello and welcome to DTV, your source for news and information about the Knox County Democratic Party. I'm Michael Davis, and I'll be your host for today's program segment with Sam McKenzie, Democratic nominee for the Tennessee House of Representatives, District 15. Sam was a winner of an extremely close primary race and will face off against the Republican nominee in the November 3rd election. And we're very happy to have him here again with us today. So Sam, thank you so much for being here and welcome back to DTV.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here. I'm extremely excited. As you say, it was a close race, but I am the Democratic candidate for District 15.
It was extremely close. Quite a nail biter there on that Thursday night. I guess you were going through quite a bit of emotions on that evening. Tell us a little bit about how that went.
Well, you know, as folks know, that it was a back and forth race. The incumbent was a distant third, but myself and Mr. Park, it went back and forth. There was a long part of the night where he had a lead by a few votes, but I was pretty confident as to how the votes came in that the precincts that I knew I was running a lot stronger than he was hadn't been counted, and that was the case. So again, I'm excited. Whether a million votes or one vote, I think the people were clear in their desire for a change in leadership, and I'm that candidate.
Okay. Yeah, we usually don't get to see that much excitement in a primary race, but it definitely was that.
Yeah.
So, your campaign centers on education funding, Medicaid expansion, criminal justice reform, and ensuring a living wage.
That's right.
For as much time as you'd like to take, please tell our viewers why these things are at the forefront of your platform and why you're the person in this race to help bring that progress in those areas.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the people, not only of the 15th district, but Knox County in general. This is a great platform, and I'm excited to present my platform. You know, bottom line is I tell folks health is wealth. The best thing we can do for people is to give them an opportunity for a healthy lifestyle, regular doctor visits, and just a relationship with healthcare. For far too many people, they're being denied, and for, in my opinion, no good reason. In terms of the Insured Tennessee, I'm really going to push to bring some form of that back in front of the House and the Senate. It just makes sense. We're leaving money in Washington, D.C. We can do better by our people, not just urban areas. And that's why I think we're going to get some momentum behind this. There's been several rural hospitals that have closed over the last 2 years. So it's time for us to have a good conversation. And again, I'm glad that folks listen and are entrusting me to be your Democratic nominee. You know, the second part that goes hand in hand with that is education. We have to do a better job funding our educational systems. We just have to, especially in this COVID environment. It's incumbent upon us. We're never going to go back exactly to the way things were prior to COVID. And that's going to take some dynamic thinking and some dynamic funding. You know, most of the students, I think all of the students in Knox County, and probably most of the students across the state have or need an electronic device. They need to be able to connect to the internet and have a conversation with their educators and prepare their homework. So, and that takes money in a lot of communities. Not everyone is fortunate, as you and I are, to be able to buy our kids or ourselves computers and to provide that broadband internet. So we need to take a deep dive in that, but also the classroom training. We need to ensure that our facilities, because we are going back to school, and I think eventually we're going to stay into school buildings. Brick and mortar buildings aren't going anywhere. So we need to fully fund educations and educators. We really need to increase the wages among some of our most valuable people. Teachers are valuable commodity. And if we don't take care of them, we're going to see a shrinkage of folks that's going to major in education. Talked a lot about criminal justice reform. And, you know, for a point here, I just want to say what's going on in this country. We just had an event happen in Wisconsin that just, it tears at the the fabric and the fiber of America. That's not who we are. That's not who we are. But we have some really, really bad actors out there, and we need to do a better job vetting those people out, ensuring that our policing and our police force is not too heavy-handed, but it's appropriate for what the situation is. And for far too often, it's a Black person being assaulted by a majority of white officers. So we just need to own that, and we need to do better. But in terms of criminal justice reform, we have to, for our nonviolent offenders, we have to get them back and engaged into society. Prison is no place for a nonviolent person, okay? Now, if they committed the crime, I think we need to have a sentence appropriate for the action. But once they get out, we need to be able to have them incorporate themselves back into society, get employment, valuable employment, and be able to vote, be able to live like a true American can. Pay for their mistakes. They paid for their mistake, and they need to get on with their lives and be able to raise their families. You know, and the last thing, and it's comes down to probably all of it's important, but we have to pay our people more. We need a living wage in the state of Tennessee. Right now, we're linked to minimum wage, whatever the national minimum wage is, we link with that. We need to increase the minimum wage, break that link if we have to, increase the minimum wage. But more importantly than that, we need to pay people a fair wage for a hard job or a fair job that they're doing for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So we really need to focus on those four things. And I'm excited. I'm extremely excited to be going to Nashville if the voters see fit in November. I don't have a Republican candidate, but I do have an independent candidate that's running against me. He's running a strong campaign, and I need your support. I need my constituent support. I need folks to call me, ask me questions, and there's several ways to contact me.
Okay. And we'll get to those contact methods here later on in the interview. If everybody stays tuned to the last slide in this interview, you'll get to see that contact information for Sam.
Right.
Starting off on criminal justice reform, again, it's right in the forefront of our headlines today, which says a lot given all that's going on in the world. But I think this seems like a time when people are ready and possibly might find the political will to finally do something.
Yes.
Which bodes well for this situation, but it's still going to be extremely difficult. What do you think, in terms of Tennessee, is the most effective thing that we can do in our state right now to improve the criminal justice system?
Sentencing guidelines. I think we really need to take a hard look at sentencing guidelines. And there's several people that are incarcerated right now that's been incarcerated for things that a judge would probably give a third or maybe an eighth of the sentence today. So I think we need to reach back, look at those cases and say, yeah, in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, that might have been a sentence, but it's not appropriate now. And we need to release those people. But in terms of there's some harsh guidelines. In fact, they called a special session to put felonies on people that are protesting, and it's very subjective. They say they're going to peacefully protest. Maybe an officer thinks that, and a third officer doesn't think that. So if they're cited or arrested, they're going to get a felony on their record that is really difficult to deal with. We need to take a look at that. We're passing too many laws that are too restrictive. So we need to go back and take a look at those, the ones that just don't make sense. During earlier, there was a big difference between different types of a drug, cocaine, that had vastly different sentencing guidelines. So I think that's the first place a legislative body can do. But we can also push back on the law enforcement and say, you need to do a better job training. You need to do a better job with cultural competency. There's a difference. There just is a difference between an average, let's talk about average, inner city person and rural person. One's not better or worse than the other, but they're different experiences. They come to a different a point. So we need to fully understand that and how to police in both of those environments.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on how cultural competency training, in terms of the sort of police violence and excessive use of force issues that we're seeing nowadays? Do you have any ideas on how cultural competency training could be improved to help police forces better understand different aspects of the community?
Yeah, I think we need to get to the brass tacks. I think we've watered down, and even the term cultural competency, it sounds very politically correct, and I guess it is. We need to talk about black and white issues. I mean, at some point, we have to call it what it is. There's a misunderstanding between, in general. Again, there's very, very general terms, so I don't want to throw a blanket over everything, but there's a common misunderstanding and fear on both parts between between African American males in particular and the police force, which oftentimes is of the majority community. So we need to have hard conversations. We need to bring people in to a room that makes each other uncomfortable. Be it someone maybe have tattoos over a majority of their body and spend a lot of time in gangs, and they're reformed, they need to be able to tell a story to the police officers. Likewise, a police officer needs to tell the story. Hey, when I walk into a situation, into a house, I don't know what I'm walking into. So I am on edge. You need to understand that as well. So a dialogue. People generally don't hate people that they've had conversations with. And I think oftentimes there's a fear, and that fear can sometimes tip over to hate. If you look at George Floyd, that's just hate. To me, that's pure and simple hate when you see what happened. He did not regard that person he did not regard Mr. Floyd as a human being. So that cultural competency, no, it's not just an 8-hour lecture by someone that you paid a couple $1,000s that goes around the country. It's having hard conversations about a myriad of things, and from both vantage points.
Right. And last question on this topic, one of the biggest things, even right here in Knoxville, is discussion of how to get different kinds of responders out to certain kinds of emergency calls. Involving social workers as first responders is getting a lot of attention, but there are some differing ideas on what that should look like, even here. How do you see this most effectively being utilized in our cities?
I've thought a lot about that, and I think bringing an untrained person into a volatile situation, I think is probably more harm than good. I think the social workers, I think the psychiatrists and psychologists, we need to have them on staff, but we need to be able to get them to a place, maybe not jail, but some kind of facility to where they can de-escalate, and the psychiatrists can understand what's going on. But putting a social worker in the squad car responding to an event to me is a little dangerous, especially if it's one officer and one social worker and a potential offender. Now this officer has to have his eyes and his focus divided between two. So I think in general, that might not be effective. Now, if there's a scene where there's already several officers there and responding, yes, bringing a social worker, someone that fully understands how to de-escalate a situation, I think would be better. But I just think putting them one-to-one in squad cars is probably not going to bear the fruit that was intended.
In terms of, just to follow up, of how there is a certain aspect of escalation of the potential for violence once armed police officers show up, who tend to respond with the tools that they may have. Mm-hmm. That may not be the crisis intervention, the softer skill set that social workers, that people that are trained to deal with crisis intervention in that way might be able to not escalate the situation and prevent a lot of the violent outcomes that happen in encounters on the street, so that the person can actually get to that facility that we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about. Do you see a way for people for these kinds of interveners to be utilized in that? Would that be beneficial?
Yes, that's actually a good point. So the way I see it is the second wave needs to have some type of social worker intervention person. Just my earlier point is the first responders, the people that are there that walk into a violent or volatile situation. I think they need to have the training necessary on how to deal with that. Now, if a social worker, if we could create a program where the social worker is capable and able to deal with violent situations, I would be fine with him or her responding. But I view this more as a second wave. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes it needs to happen right then and right there. And one other thing I'll say, I think oftentimes we have grown to expect full resolution by the time the police leaves the scene. Some things in my mind, I see oftentimes people are trying to leave. They're trying to go away from the potential volatile situation. Let them go.
Mm-hmm.
No one else is in harm's way. So I think we need to make better decisions on how we deal with these volatile situations. If there's a volatile situation right here, and the person is obviously liberated, intoxicated, and someone's going to walk him or her home, I think we need to let that happen. Far too often, we feel that people have to go to jail. If I'm there, someone needs to get arrested or be able to separate this. And I don't think that's bearing the fruit that is a thought by the officers.
Okay. All right. Definitely a topic that we could probably spend all evening on. But
Yes,
we'll
absolutely.
turn to the next biggest thing that's on everyone's mind right now: healthcare issues. Medicaid expansion, as we have mentioned, is a big part of your platform.
Mm-hmm.
How do you counter the argument that providing healthcare is not the government's role? That this is an overstep in what our government should be doing.
You know, we're the only civilized first world nation that had that point of view. I disagree. There needs to be a floor. Healthcare is not an option, in my opinion, and I think in the majority of Americans' opinion, it's not an option. What you're going to fund it as people, but you're going to fund it through emergency room visits and things of that nature. And they're not going to get the quality healthcare. It's going to be band-aids where there needs to be a healthcare plan for the person. So I just fundamentally disagree with that mindset that healthcare is not a right. Now, everyone doesn't need to Cadillac plan and do a lot of diagnosis, but a baseline healthcare, it will pay for itself in spades. It really, really will. But we have to make it make sense to people, because hospitals are part of the neighborhood. They're part of the community. And these rural communities are dying and caving in because they don't have health care. I met with a gentleman yesterday that was up in Upper East Tennessee, Hancock County, and he ended up looking at a hospital that was fairly close, but the next one around that was 2 counties away. So it makes sense to have Medicaid fully expanded. The Affordable Care Act is a law of the land. It's a good law. It's not it can be tweaked and worked, but it's a good law, and it was timely. And now we need to fully fund Medicaid and expand Medicaid as far as we can.
Okay. So the ACA has been around for a while now as the law of the land. Is there evidence from other states that it is beneficial, and how is it beneficial?
Yeah, there is evidence that it is that people are turning the corner, that the tide is rising for all, and just in terms of and the cost, there were all kinds of rumors and wild thoughts about it. Was this going to bankrupt the country and the state. That hasn't happened. But there have been positive results where Medicaid is fully expanded. Now, we're not there yet in terms of these other states, these bordering states, because there's other issues. You know, there's diet issues, there's food deserts issues, there are mobility issues. But I do think the healthcare, those conversations that people are having with their physicians, with their healthcare providers, with their nurse practitioners, are bearing fruits in other areas. And I think I know it will happen here in the state of Tennessee.
Okay. I'd like to turn to an interesting part of your platform about the living wage. Many voters who might benefit from a higher minimum wage may very well be the same voters who would vote against candidates who would be in favor of it. What do you think is the disconnect there? Why is that happening? Is this an educational problem or purely political?
It's purely political. It's purely political. You know, even when we looked at the whole mask, the mask and the wearing of the mask, it became political. And what happens when it becomes purely political, people stop listening to reason. And I think what has to happen is a span of time has to go by. And that is where we are. But you're absolutely right. A lot of, if it came to a vote today, we may not pass it. And the people who will vote against it are the people that will make $15 an hour. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle. Education is key. You know, there's voter registration, but there's also that educational piece. We have to educate people on what it will mean. Oftentimes there's a big, you know, I hate to say Fox News headline, and they get wrapped into that and not really dig into the issues for themselves. They may say the same with the other side, and maybe that's some truth to it. But let's have a conversation about it. I do think if people listen to what a $5 per hour increase or $4 per hour increase to minimum wage, what it would do and what it wouldn't do. It would not destroy the economy. Prices of goods and services would not go through the roof, but we would all have a better life and be able to better take care of our families.
Right. So one of the usual voices of opposition to this is that increasing the minimum wage would hurt some of these businesses that employ large numbers of people on minimum wage. So they're usually in opposition to that. So regarding that point, if the federal minimum wage stays the same and the 8 states bordering Tennessee don't increase, say, and Tennessee does, what would this mean to Tennessee's economy? Are there counteracting benefits to whatever losses might happen?
Absolutely, absolutely. If we paid more, people will come. If you build it, people will come. We will be a state that people are driven to instead of one that people are driven away from. If we pass it, our rural areas will start to flush out and flesh out things. And we're not, you know, in the grand scheme of things, from an average business. Now, I'm not talking about a 2-person operation, but if you have a 20-person operation or a 100-person operation, the amount of money that you're putting in his or her wallet is not, I firmly believe, it's not going to break you. And you're going to get a benefit of efficiency. You're going to get a better employee. You're going to be able to hire better employees. And you know, it's a carrot and a stick proposition. It happens. It happens. You can, I won't say work them harder, but more efficiently work a person who's paid at a wage that makes sense to them, that they're happy with. It just again, a rising tide is going to float all boats, including those business owners. You know, I wish we could say try it for 2 years. If you don't like it, we'll go back. No one would go back, and I think, and I know everyone will be happy on the end. That's not a feasible law to pass, but I strongly feel it will not hurt business owners to pay their people more money than what they're paying.
Okay. Definitely seems like it might alleviate some of the problems we were just discussing in criminal justice, education, healthcare there.
Absolutely.
Want to give you some time to talk about education. what do you think are some of the biggest setbacks to public in the just a few minutes that we do have left? What do you see as the biggest setback in public education in Tennessee in recent years?
Well, it has. I don't think funding has kept up with the pace of education. When I was on county commission, we were having the conversations about giving during Dr. McIntyre was the superintendent, about putting a device in every high schooler's hand. And there was a lot of pushback against that. And I said at the time, we're not going back to the abacus. That's not going to happen. We're moving forward. And as we move forward, there's a cost associated with that, not just in the device, but in the training, because we have to train our teachers, we got to train our administrators on how to most effectively use that device. And, so we have to do a better job at funding education for today's generation. People don't write papers anymore. They compose their papers at the keyboards. And they've been doing that, and it's getting better and smoother to do that. And again, there's a cost associated with it. So we can't use the same funding models than we did in the 70s and the 80s. And so I feel we're still not fully funding the BEP, the basic education program, especially in our urban areas. Those are where we most need additional funds. Yes, it takes more. They get more through Title I in terms of those Title I schools, and they're able to do some programming. But when you got a mom at home who's working and probably working a second job, there's just not that contact time. It just is. And if the mother or the father is not college educated, they're not able to teach pre-calculus to that 11th grader. So there has to be more done in the schools. So community schools, enhancements within our educational system are needed. And so I'm pushing again to fully fund the BEP for all school systems, both rural and urban.
Okay. We've got just a couple of minutes left. You are, I believe, a physicist by trade. Is that correct?
I am.
Okay. Which deals with known quantities, measurable things, immutable laws.
Yes.
How do you deal with people, which can be such a mystery at times and such a changing, amorphous sort of presentation of issues and problems to solve?
You've hit the nail on the head. I take off one hat when I come off from work and put on another. It's such a change that I actually enjoy that. I enjoy the change. But I'll answer that question this way. The truth doesn't move. So it's how you explain the truth or your opinion to people. It's a tough proposition from a person who's very, linear, who fully understands, it's a if-then type of a situation. But it's good, because what I think happens is there's a melding of minds. I've learned as much from people that have a point of view that may be way out there from my standpoint, and hopefully I can bring them into mine. So it's a really dynamic situation. But at the end of the day, I like people. I always have, like people. Joe Biden, during his acceptance speech, and I knew that from before. I was a big stutterer in school, so I was technically bent and leaning. But once I started to be able to speak and to bring out my thoughts, I think that helped me, and it gave me that desire to want to help, because it was pent up there, and I'm still there. So it's unique, it's different, but I think I do it well. And I learn as much as I give as much as I get. I learn as much as I teach.
That's great. Well, Mr. McKenzie, thank you so much for being here with us today on DTV. It's been a pleasure talking to you again. How can people get in touch with your campaign real quickly?
Yes, please, and I'll encourage you all to take a picture. There'll be a snapshot to come up with all my contact information. I'm on Facebook, Team Sam McKenzie. My website is teamsammckenzie.com. give me a call, shoot me an email at sam.mckenzie@comcast.net. I'm ready. I've been answering a lot of questions. And again, I look forward to serving you in Nashville.
All right. Sam, thank you much for being here with us again. And we've got your contact information there on screen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to all of our viewers. This has been DTV. I'm Michael Davis, and we'll see you next time.